Hello, my name is Luis Camacho. For this analysis, I'm going to use as the main source David Nunes' task-based language teaching from Cambridge University Press, released back in 2004. What is the communicative family?
Great deal has been said and written about CLT in the last 50 years, and it is sometimes assumed that the approach is a unitary one, whereas it consists of a family of approaches. And, as is the case with most families, there are disagreements. However, no one is willing to assert that they do not belong to the family.
What is the link between task-based teaching and the CLT approach?
CLT is a broad, philosophical approach to the language curriculum that draws on theory and research in linguistics, anthropology, psychology, and sociology. Task-based language teaching represents a realization of this philosophy at the levels of syllabus design and methodology.
What is task-based language teaching?
An important conceptual basis for task-based language teaching is experiential learning. This approach takes the learner's immediate personal experience as the point of departure for the learning experience.
How can you define tasks?
There are two types of tasks: real-world or target tasks, refer to uses of language in the world beyond the classroom. Pedagogical tasks are those that occur in the classroom. When they are transformed from the real world to the classroom, tasks become pedagogical in nature.
Can you explain the pedagogical nature of a task?
A pedagogical task involves learners in comprehending, manipulating, producing, or interacting in the target language while their attention is focused on mobilizing their grammatical knowledge to express meaning. The task should also have a sense of completeness, being able to stand alone as a communicative act.
What are the principles and practices of task-based language teaching?
A needs-based approach to content selection. An emphasis on learning to communicate through interaction in the target language. The introduction of authentic texts into the learning situation. The provision of opportunities for learners to focus not only on language but also on the learning process itself. An enhancement of the learner's own personal experiences as important contributing elements to classroom learning.
Do you have a theoretical framework?
Although it is not always immediately apparent, everything that is done in the classroom is underpinned by beliefs about the nature of language, the nature of the learning process, and the nature of the teaching act.
What is the nature of language in this approach?
Language is more than a set of grammatical rules, with attendant sets of vocabulary, to be memorized. It is a dynamic resource for creating meaning.
How do you explain language learning?
Learning is no longer seen simply as a process of habit formation. Learners and the cognitive processes are fundamentally important to the learning process. Additionally, learning as a social process is increasingly emphasized, and socio-cultural theories are beginning to be drawn on in addition, or even in preference, to cognitive theories.
What is the role of teachers?
Curriculum development becomes a collaborative effort between teachers and learners, since learners will be involved in decisions on content selection, methodology, and evaluation.
And what is the role of learners?
Intellectual growth occurs when learners engage in and reflect on sequences of tasks. The active involvement of the learner is therefore central to the approach, and a rubric that conveniently captures the active, experiential nature of the process is learning by doing.
What's your design framework?
At the top, we start with real-world or target tasks. To create learning opportunities in the classroom, we must transform these real-world tasks into pedagogical tasks. Such tasks can be placed on a continuum from rehearsal tasks to activation tasks. In the TBLT framework presented here, form-focused work is presented in the form of enabling skills, so called because they are designed to develop skills and knowledge that will ultimately facilitate the process of authentic communication.
How do you explain this framework?
A rehearsal task bears a clear and obvious relationship to its corresponding real-world counterpart. Not all pedagogical tasks have such a clear and obvious relationship to the real world. Many role plays, simulations, problem-solving tasks and information exchange tasks have what I call an activation rationale.
How do you deal with emerging language skills?
Learners, in early stages of the learning process, can benefit from a focus on form, and learners should not be expected to generate language that has not been made accessible to them in some way. In the framework, enabling skills are of two kinds: language exercises and communicative activities.
Can you give us an example of syllabus design in TBLT?
Sure, tasks and functions are obviously closely related. Any task will be underpinned by at least one or more functions. Tasks can be thought of as functions and context. They allow for functions and grammar to be activated in a particular communicative context.
Can you give us an example of sequence design?
Yes, here we can see a pedagogical sequence of 6 steps for introducing tasks. First, we create a number of schema-building tasks that introduce initial vocabulary, language, and context for the task. Second, give learners controlled practice in the target language vocabulary, structures, and functions. In the third place, give learners authentic listening practice. Then, focus learners on linguistic elements, like grammar and vocabulary. Fifth, provide freer practice. Finally, you introduce the pedagogical task.
Well, that'll be all. Thank you very much for your attention.